Chapter 20. The Awakening. Corey opened his eyes and for longer than a moment had no concept of where he was or how long he had been sitting in meditation under the tree. He took a deep inhale and exhale and then he looked around, remembering where he was. He was sitting under a baobab tree at the edge of a cliff overlooking the ocean. He was surrounded by trees, plants, the earth, and so much silence. As he became aware of his body and his surroundings, he remembered following an eagle who had flown around him for minutes before leading him to this place. For some reason, unbeknown to him, he had been overcome by a deep need to meditate, so he had sat at the base of this tree that had summoned him. He looked into his bag and found his watch. He had been sitting here for over an hour, and yet it had seemed as if he had been away for much longer than that. He smiled as he realized that he had reached a new level of samadhi, one in which the universe had spoken to him in many different forms and provided him with the knowledge and truth he sought. It was true. All that he had heard and read about, in connecting to his true self, he had connected to all the infinite knowledge in the universe and discovered the truth about yoga. It had all seemed so real, more real than his present-day reality of being awake. He opened his eyes. He wanted to go back to that place where he had experienced a love like none other, a place that had left him feeling joyous. As he tightened his eyes and asked them to bring forth the cove, he heard the eagle. For a moment he thought, wow, that was easy. But as the squawk continued, he'd opened his eyes and looked into the blue sky above. It was the same eagle, the one he had instinctively knew had led him to this place that he was struggling to leave, unsure of what lay in the next moment. He watched her as she gently swooped down from the sky and landed on the tree above. For a moment they both stared at each other. Corey half expected her to say, "Hello, Corey," in that great Indian accent of hers. Then she spread her wings and lifted off the tree to fly in circles around him, and he knew she was asking him to follow her again, so he did. She had, after all, led him here. He slowly untangled his body, so grateful for asanas, and began to follow the eagle. As he made his way across the cliff and down to a little beach, he stopped in his tracks. There, on the beach below him, sat a vision of beauty. A brown-skinned woman who was sitting on a yoga mat surrounded by a spectrum of humans. Mesmerized, he sat down on a rock and listened to what she was saying. He watched the eagle swoop over her head, and as it did, she raised her head and smiled at the eagle as they were one, and then she spoke. "Hello, eagle. So nice to see you again. Thank you for coming to visit and reminding these humans that you are connected to them." She bowed to the eagle as it glided back out onto the ocean. He could see the look of amusement on her students. They obviously had spent time with her. None of them looked at her like she was crazy. He listened as she began to speak to them, and what he heard left his heart with a yearning to love her. She spoke with an Indian accent, the same one Eagle had spoken to him in his meditations. How was it possible? And then he smiled, remembering Eagle's famous words that in yoga the impossible was always possible. Her words mesmerized him. It was as if the contents of his meditations were spilling out into his waking world. Here is what he heard flow out of her being. "My greatest wish for all of you is that at the end of our time together this week, you will have a greater understanding of what yoga is. You will understand that it is not an exercise or a cult, but a way of life that when coupled with a healthy diet will literally change your life forever. If change is what you seek, of course. Because as you have seen, it is all connected. What we feed our body, our mind, our senses all have a deep and profound impact on how our lives play out. Our human form is a manifestation of nature and therefore transient. Only your soul is immortal and part of a larger consciousness known as the universe. In the coming weeks, I hope to give you both the awareness and the tools to be healthy and to connect you to more realities than the one you live in now. You define your reality by what you project out into it. It is not the external world that defines who you are and how your life will play out, but your response to that world. Changing the external will not incite internal change, but changing yourself will change the external to reflect who you are becoming. So yes, Sonia and Paula, changing your clothes, your hair, your partner, or your car will not really create lasting change in your life. He watched them laugh with her as if they'd known each other for a lifetime. Even he felt a connection to her, although he had never met her. Or had he? He pulled his attention back to the moment, for he wanted to hear more of her thoughts. Now, should you choose to not follow the path of yoga or any path that espouses internal change, you will forever be limited in the life you lead. Additionally, you may never attain your highest potential or know your true purpose. This is not a threat, merely a truth. I know many of you listening to me feel helpless and powerless to create change in the world. Well, it may surprise you to know that the universe, also known as God to some, actually hangs out in your form and is just sitting around waiting for you to take the journey to it. So it may reveal the unimaginable powers that live within you. You know, my friends, we say be kind to strangers, even those who are not kind to you, because you are connected to every living being. And if for a moment in time you can cause even the slightest shift in someone through an act of kindness and compassion, you will change the path of that person, even if just by a degree. That slight change will change the trajectory of life on this planet, which will then resonate out into the rest of the universe. Because remember, everything that happens in your life is a result of or influenced by the actions of every other living thing on this planet and vice versa. This has been by far the greatest gift yoga has given me. It has disabled my ego and pride and in its place opened a fountain of love that flows over all that cross my path. In response to all I give out, I have been shown so much love from strangers, friends, animals, and the universe. There is not a day that passes that I don't have a moment of being stunned by how much love there is out there when it is given a safe space and the confidence to reveal itself. I am shown how we are all so deeply connected to each other under all of our superficial differences. Yoga has taught me that when people begin to drain my energy to a point where it is not healthy for me, I can remove myself from those relationships to be kind to me. Because yoga is also about being kind to yourself and loving yourself from a place of light, not ego. And sometimes being kind and loving to yourself means having to say no as well as learning to accept no. I hope through the story of yoga, which I shall begin to teach you from your mat, you may understand that there is no shortcut or app to change. To connect to every living thing, to have a multitude of beautiful lives in this lifetime will take work. There's not a day that goes by where I don't have to do the work by either coming to my mat, meditating, self-observing, or adhering to yamas and niyamas. Don't get me wrong, there are days when I fall off my mat and I just want to give up and descend back into the hole from which I climbed out of. But then something happens. A perfect stranger shows me an unexpected love and a kindness, an animal seeks my company, or a river of gratitude and happiness washes over my heart to remind me why I am on this journey. This path is so hard because our conditioned mind is strong, especially if you get on this path when you are older. If everyone understood yoga and started practicing from a young age, we could bring our world back into balance within a generation. It would not matter how many humans there were in the world, because each and every one of us would live in balance and harmony with our planet. We would lead from our souls and not from our senses and desires. We would stop interfering with the process of life. We would accept our journeys and live lives devoid of chronic, harmful stress. And as a result, we would most likely die healthy deaths. But most importantly, we would live a life, accept death, and live in a world of unbound imaginative creativity. So many of us fail to ever access the unique creativity that sits within. We are a manifestation of the universe, and within each one of us there exists the creativity and power that led to creation. Look at the natural world and its creative magnificence. How often have you looked at something like the Victoria Falls and been speechless? We have that same creativity within us to create beauty that lives in coherence with its environment. Just think what our world could look like if we were able to access that unique creative energy and use it for the betterment of our existence rather than for financial gain. We would live in forests and gardens. There would be no waste, no pollution, no cars. Best of all, we would live in a world of contentment and love where love thy neighbor may just be a hippopotamus. It takes great strength to move against the stream and not let others' fears, judgments, and perspectives beat you back into a box. It takes courage to literally dare to be different, so the next time you hit a wall in your life, don't just lay down and give up or keep hitting it. Instead, stop. Step back and understand where that wall came from, because most likely it is a wall you have built that comes from your past, your own karma. Yoga has taught me all this, as well as shown me how to observe and control my mind and behaviors. Yoga has taught me to harness the potential of my energetic body to connect to all the different frequencies out there and to truly know that what I give out in my intentions, my energy, will be reflected back to me in my reality. Yoga has taught me to understand the power of prayers and mantras when repeated over and over again, each word containing a vibration and energy that shifts my vibration and unblocks me. Yoga has taught me to understand that such rituals as fasting are about learning to rein in my senses and control my desire. Yoga has taught me about the power of thought not only when sent out into the world, but also when creating a new garden of thoughts and ideas in my mind. Too often we are taught rituals and told to engage in behaviors without understanding why we do them. We follow them blindly and as a result end up not entertaining change. This is why so many wars are still fought in the name of religion, why so many divisions and hatreds between humans remain. You are blind followers rather than enlightened leaders in your own life. Only acts done with full knowledge translate into deep change, and only in change can we all influence our destiny set out by our own karmas. It is just too easy to blame the world and others for your lives, because to accept responsibility for your life is to acknowledge all your fallibilities, your insecurities, and your fears. When you do this, you then understand that every bad thing that ever happened to you happened for a reason. It was not random. Instead of allowing those acts to drown you, yoga asks you to learn from them and use them to change. Yoga asks you to say thank you to all those that hurt you because they came to teach. There can be no change without vulnerability, because only when we are vulnerable are we open to change. Otherwise, we are locked behind walls where we speak change but don't allow for it. There can be no change without acceptance or surrender. Lastly, there can be no change without accepting who you are in this moment, and with the understanding that it does not mean that who you will be, that is who you will always be. For humans, we can be anything we want to be. With that, she placed her hands together and asked her students to do the same. They finished with the ohms that were still resonating in his head. It was then that he knew that he had found the love he had experienced in his meditations. Eagle really was a genius, for she had led him to a soul filled with light and love. In his heart, he knew that to love someone like her, he would have to engage in a love devoid of fear. He would have to practice yoga. He slowly stood up and walked down the beach. He was waiting for the students to wander off before he approached her. "Hi. I'm Corey. I have sat listening to you and was wondering if I could walk with you for a little while. I have just come out of one of the most magnificent meditation and when I did, your eagle led me to you." She burst out into laughter that made his heart light up. Yes, Eagle. I love her. She came to me when I most needed to hear nature and then continued to appear every time I needed to be reminded that I was free and only my mind enslaves me. She paused, stared into his eyes for a moment, and then smiled. Sure, let's walk, so I may discover why my friend the eagle has brought you to me. If you have a message for me, or if you are the one I've been asking the universe for in my meditations. Come, you can walk me back to my yoga studio. He fell into step with her as she began to walk down the beach. For several moments they walked with silence between them. He knew she was taking a moment to let her energy meet his, and then she turned to him and said, By the way, my name is Sheena. In that moment, Corey knew the magic of yoga had begun. As his eyes traveled across sky, along ocean, down at earth, and then gazed at the trees in the distance, he gently bowed his head as he felt the impossible meeting the possible and whispered, Thank you.